The unexpected encounter. Elon Musk strode into the grocery store on a brisk Tuesday afternoon, his usual sense of purpose replaced by an unusual sense of tranquility. Dressed in a simple black t-shirt, dark jeans, and sneakers, he looked like any other customer who'd come in for their weekly shopping. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, illuminating the aisles filled with everyday items. A stark contrast to the usual high-stakes world of rockets, artificial intelligence, and electric cars that he usually inhabited. As he pushed his cart down the aisles, a couple of heads turned, some more subtle than others. Whispers rippled through the store, though none of the voices dared to speak aloud the name that lingered in the air. Most of the customers recognized him. After all, Elon Musk was a man whose fame stretched far beyond the confines of Silicon Valley. Yet, here he was, blending in with the regular crowd, doing something as mundane as buying groceries. Rachel stood at the end of the aisle, unloading cans of soup onto the shelf, her hands moving quickly and efficiently, though her mind was elsewhere. Her ponytail bobbed with each movement, a few strands escaping and falling into her eyes. She wasn't the type to get starstruck. In fact, she prided herself on keeping her cool in any situation. But when she glanced up and caught sight of him, her breath caught in her throat. Elon Musk was standing just a few feet away, scanning the shelves for his next item. His face, usually plastered on the cover of business magazines or in headlines across the globe, was calm and unreadable. There was no entourage, no press, no distractions. Just a man, simply looking for groceries, like everyone else. Rachel froze for a moment, her hands stilling in midair as her brain tried to process what was happening. Her gaze flicked quickly toward his face, then away, as if she could erase the moment. Her thoughts were a jumbled mess. Was it really him? She wondered. She glanced back at him, his back turned, oblivious to her gaze. She quickly refocused, pretending to be lost in her task of stocking cans, but her heart was racing. Her thoughts were anything but calm. She had seen Elon Musk before, obviously. Who hadn't? But this was different. In the vast ocean of people, he was the one who had changed the world, who had captured the public imagination. And here he was, just a few feet away, with no one else recognizing the significance of the moment. She felt a little silly for even thinking about it. He was just another customer in the store, after all. But still, there was something about seeing him in this ordinary context that made her uneasy. Rachel had never been a fan of celebrity worship. She believed in hard work, in the quiet strength of those who built their lives through effort, not fame. But seeing someone like Musk, who had built an empire from nothing but vision and sheer determination, left her feeling small, inconsequential. She shook her head and refocused, but it was hard to quiet the buzz in her mind. As she finished stocking the shelf, she glanced around, hoping no one had noticed her lapse in concentration. That's when she saw him again, Elon, moving further down the aisle, his cart beginning to fill with groceries. He seemed completely unfazed by the whispers or the subtle stares from the other customers. Rachel took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was just another cashier, just another person in this busy world. There was no reason to let the presence of a billionaire make her feel out of place. But still, as she moved to the front of the store to prepare for the next shift, her mind wandered back to him. She couldn't shake the odd feeling that something significant was unfolding. Why was he here, in her world, buying groceries like everyone else? Was there a message in his simple presence, or was it just an ordinary occurrence that would pass unnoticed, like everything else in the world? By the time Rachel stepped behind the counter, the afternoon rush was in full swing. The store had begun to hum with the familiar sounds of customers chatting, the occasional beep of the cash register, and the clatter of shopping carts rolling across the floor. Rachel's hands moved mechanically as she scanned the items, her mind still caught in the whirlwind of thoughts she couldn't quite process. A man in a suit came up to her counter, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders at someone. His voice was curt, impatient, and Rachel barely registered him as she scanned the cans in front of her. Her mind kept flicking to Elon, who was now in the line just a few registers down. calmly pushing his cart toward her. The man in the suit finished his transaction and left with a distracted nod. But Rachel's thoughts remained fixated on Elon Musk. She had been working at this grocery store for almost 3 years, and in all that time, she had encountered a variety of people. But she had never imagined that she would be standing behind the counter while one of the world's most influential figures strolled into her store, buying bread and olive oil. Rachel's hands moved faster as the line at her register began to grow. The woman behind the man with the suit was juggling a fussy toddler, her cart overflowing with groceries. A few more people followed, and soon the line at Rachel's register was snaking down the aisle. She tried her best to maintain her professional composure, but there was no ignoring the tension in her shoulders. The atmosphere felt different, charged, as though something momentous was about to happen. Her gaze flickered toward Elon once again. He was now at the head of his line, pushing his cart up to the register. He looked calm, serene, but there was something in the air, something that Rachel couldn't shake. The simple act of buying groceries had become more than just a routine. It was as if something invisible was hovering over the store, waiting to be revealed. "Busy day," one of the cashiers at the next register said sympathetically, glancing toward Rachel. Rachel nodded but didn't speak, her mind too full of unspoken words. As the line continued to grow, she realized that she wasn't just scanning groceries. She was waiting for something. And then, as Elon Musk placed his items on the conveyor belt and locked eyes with her for the first time, Rachel knew everything was about to change. The unexpected conversation. Rachel felt a flutter in her chest as Elon Musk rolled his cart up to her register. It was as if time itself had slowed down, every sound in the store fading into a low hum. The soft clatter of shopping carts, the hum of the fluorescent lights, and the distant chatter of other customers now muted. The usual buzz of the afternoon rush, the hustle and bustle of an average grocery store, seemed to vanish in the face of this surreal moment. She steadied herself, focusing on the task at hand, scanning groceries, making change, smiling at customers. But her mind was a storm. Elon Musk, the man who revolutionized technology, space travel, and the automotive industry. She'd read the headlines. She knew the accolades. But now, as he stood in front of her, his expression neutral and calm, he was just another person buying groceries. The moment felt both monumental and mundane, and she couldn't quite wrap her head around it. "Good afternoon," she said, forcing a polite smile. Her voice was steady, but there was a slight quiver she couldn't hide. "Hi there," Elon replied, his deep voice surprisingly gentle, lacking the sharp, authoritative tone she had expected from someone of his stature. His eyes met hers, and there was something disarming about his presence. No arrogance, no sense of superiority. Just a man, quietly going about his business. It was, in many ways, the most unexpected thing she had encountered all day. Rachel hesitated, scanning the first item. A loaf of sourdough bread. She was trying hard not to let her nerves show, but her heart was racing. It wasn't every day that a billionaire, one of the wealthiest and most influential people in the world, stood in front of her, buying simple things like bread and olive oil. But there was no time to linger in the surreal nature of the moment. The line behind him was growing, and she had a job to do. "Nice day, isn't it?" Elon continued, as if he were just another person making small talk. Rachel's fingers brushed over the scanner. "Yeah, it's nice. Weather's perfect today," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Keep it professional. Keep it cool," she reminded herself. The words felt automatic, rehearsed, but inside, she was fighting the urge to say something. Anything that would break the ice, something that would make this strange encounter less strange. But before she could formulate another comment, Elon spoke again, this time with a tone that was unexpectedly personal. "You seem a bit distracted," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of curiosity. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in judgment, but in a way that made Rachel realize he was paying attention. "Is something on your mind?" Rachel blinked, taken aback. Of all the things she had expected him to say, this wasn't it. She shifted uncomfortably, scanning the next item. A bottle of olive oil. No, not really. Just busy, I guess, she stammered, her hands moving faster than she meant to, almost fumbling with the bottle. Think, Rachel. You're being too obvious. Elon's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer, as if considering something. His lips parted slightly, and then he asked in a more casual tone, "Are you okay? You seem like you're somewhere else." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected to hear that from him, of all people. Why would he care? She thought. But his sincerity was palpable. He wasn't just another customer in line, detached and uninterested. He was present. The fact that he noticed her, that he'd seen something in her that others might overlook, threw her off balance. It wasn't like she had been acting strange. Or maybe she had. Maybe the unease she had been feeling all afternoon. The nerves, the heightened awareness, had been visible in her actions, in the way she carried herself. But why would Elon Musk care? "I'm fine," she said quickly, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Just tired, I guess. It's a busy day." Elon nodded, his expression softening. "I get it. I've been there. Sometimes it feels like the world expects you to be in a constant state of hustle, but it's hard to keep up with everything." He chuckled, though there was an underlying sadness to it. "Even for me." For a brief moment, Rachel forgot she was standing behind a register, working a shift like any other day. Instead, she found herself staring at Elon Musk, the man who had changed industries, created companies that spanned continents, and amassed wealth beyond most people's comprehension. And here he was, a human being, just like her, speaking with a kind of vulnerability she hadn't expected. "Don't let it get to you," he continued, his voice a little quieter. "You know, we're all just people trying to figure things out, doing the best we can." For a moment, Rachel forgot where she was. She glanced down at the register, scanning the items mindlessly. What do I say to that? Her thoughts were a whirlwind. He's just like me. Of course, in a way they were. But how could she possibly relate to the life Elon Musk had lived? The opportunities, the challenges, the endless decisions that came with being a billionaire, those were things she could never truly understand. She could never live in his shoes, not in this lifetime. Yet here he was, extending empathy, acknowledging that the world could be overwhelming, that even the most successful people faced moments of uncertainty, and somehow that made her feel lighter. She hadn't realized how much weight she had been carrying until this moment. There was something about Elon Musk's presence that made the stress and tension of her day feel insignificant, like it could all melt away with a few words. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," Elon added, as if reading her thoughts. He smiled, and there was a warmth to it that took Rachel by surprise. "It's just that when you meet someone who's as good at hiding what's going on inside as you are, you can't help but wonder what's really going on." Rachel chuckled nervously, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy. "I'm fine, really," she repeated. "Just a little worn out, that's all." Elon gave a small nod, as though accepting her answer, but his gaze remained on her for a beat longer. "Well, don't forget to take a break when you need it," he said, his tone light but firm. "You can't pour from an empty cup." There was something about the way he said it, so genuine, yet so profound, that left her feeling like this wasn't just a casual conversation. It felt like he was speaking to her on a deeper level, not just as a billionaire to a cashier, but as a person who had been through his own share of struggles and understood the importance of self-care. Rachel couldn't help but wonder if he had spoken those words to anyone else that day, or if they had been meant just for her. As she finished scanning the last of his items, she realized something. The encounter with Elon Musk, of all people, had done something she hadn't expected. It had shifted her perspective on her own life, on the weight she'd been carrying for far too long, on the stress and exhaustion that seemed to pile up day after day. And in this simple exchange, she found a moment of clarity, a reminder that she wasn't alone in feeling overwhelmed, that everyone, no matter how high their status, had their own battles to fight. She finished scanning his groceries, offering a polite smile as she gave him his total. "That'll be $42.87, she said, still a little dazed by the conversation. Elon nodded, reaching into his pocket for his wallet. He handed her a credit card, and as she swiped it, their eyes met once more. "Thank you, Rachel," he said, his voice sincere. "Take care of yourself. It's easy to forget to do that in the chaos of life. But remember, sometimes the best way to move forward is to take a step back." With that, he took his bags and walked out of the store, leaving Rachel standing behind the counter, feeling lighter than she had all day. The line behind him moved forward, and life returned to its normal pace. But for Rachel, everything had changed. A moment of reflection. The minutes that followed Elon Musk's departure seemed to stretch on forever, yet everything around Rachel continued in its usual rhythm. The line behind Elon had already moved forward, the soft beep of the register continuing its predictable pace. But for Rachel, everything felt different. She scanned the next item, a carton of eggs, but her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Her mind kept replaying the conversation they'd just had. She had always been the type to compartmentalize her thoughts, to keep her emotions in check, but Elon Musk's words had hit her like a wave. "Don't forget to take a break when you need it. You can't pour from an empty cup." It was a simple statement, yet it felt profound. She'd heard similar advice before, of course. Everyone knew that self-care was important, that it was essential to set boundaries and take time for oneself. But for some reason, hearing it from Elon, of all people, made it feel real. It felt like a wake-up call, an invitation to slow down and reconsider how she had been living her life. Rachel had always been a hard worker. She came from a family that valued diligence and perseverance. She had grown up watching her mother work tirelessly to provide for their small household, teaching Rachel that success didn't come easy. It was earned through sweat and sacrifice. And so, Rachel had adopted the same mindset. She had been working 2 jobs, one here at the grocery store, the other as a waitress at a diner down the street for the past 2 years. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. The bills had to be paid, and there was no room for weakness. The cost of living was high, and Rachel knew that if she wasn't working constantly, she'd never get ahead. But now, with Elon's words echoing in her mind, she found herself questioning everything. What had she been sacrificing all this time? Sure, she had managed to pay the bills and keep a roof over her head, but at what cost? Her social life had all but disappeared. She rarely had time to catch up with old friends, and the last time she had taken a real vacation was 2 years ago, before she had taken on the second job. In the pursuit of stability, she had lost sight of the things that made life enjoyable, that brought her peace, and now she felt like she was running on empty. Rachel's fingers froze for a moment, holding the carton of eggs in midair, as her mind drifted deeper into thought. She thought about her own dreams, the things she had put on hold. She had always wanted to travel, to see the world beyond the small town she had grown up in. There were books on photography sitting on her shelf, dreams of one day capturing the beauty of places she had never seen before. She had dreamed of opening her own business, of creating a space where people could come together, share stories, and find solace. But those dreams had seemed so far away, tucked away in a corner of her mind, overshadowed by the harsh reality of working nonstop just to make ends meet. Rachel gently placed the carton of eggs in the bag, her movements automatic, but her thoughts were anything but. Her chest tightened with the weight of it all. The realization that she had been so focused on surviving that she had forgotten how to truly live. And it wasn't just about her. She thought of her mother, too, who had spent years sacrificing her own happiness to make sure Rachel had a better life. It was as though both of them had been trapped in a cycle of hard work, with no end in sight, no room for joy. As she scanned another item, Rachel's mind wandered back to Elon. She remembered the warmth in his voice when he spoke to her, the sincerity that radiated from him as if he genuinely cared about her well-being. It was strange, really. This was a man who could buy and sell entire companies, a man whose name had become synonymous with cutting-edge technology and space exploration. Yet here he was, treating her with kindness and empathy. She had always thought of people like him as out of touch, distant from the realities of everyday life. But that brief conversation had shattered her assumptions. Maybe he wasn't so different after all. Maybe he understood more than she had given him credit for. Her hands moved more slowly now, scanning items without really paying attention to them. She needed time to process everything. She thought of the life she had been living, always rushing, always working, and wondered what would happen if she made a change. What if she took a step back, just like Elon had suggested? What if she slowed down and actually listened to her own needs? Could she find a way to balance her responsibilities with her own happiness, her own growth? The line at her register continued to move forward, but Rachel was no longer just going through the motions. Her thoughts had drifted to the possibilities of the future, the paths she had yet to explore. She realized how much time she had spent on autopilot, not really living in the present, always waiting for the next opportunity to come, the next paycheck to arrive. But life wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving, about finding moments of joy in the midst of the chaos. It was about creating the kind of life she wanted, not just settling for the life that had been handed to her. By the time the afternoon rush had subsided, Rachel felt a sense of clarity that she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had been so caught up in the grind that she had forgotten to consider what made her truly happy. The simple exchange with Elon Musk had given her the space to think about her future in a way she hadn't allowed herself to before. She realized that it was time for a change, time to prioritize herself and her own well-being, even if it meant making some tough decisions along the way. As she finished the last transaction of the shift, Rachel felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't entirely sure what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was no longer content to simply survive. She wanted to live, and she was ready to start making changes, no matter how small, to create the life she had always dreamed of. With a sense of determination, she turned to the next customer in line, ready to face whatever the world had in store for her. The ripple effect. Rachel's thoughts lingered long after her shift ended. As she walked out of the grocery store that evening, the weight of the day felt lighter, less oppressive. It was as though a cloud had lifted, one she hadn't realized had been hanging over her for so long. The conversation with Elon Musk had been brief, but it had ignited something within her, a spark of possibility that she couldn't ignore. The cool evening air hit her as she stepped outside, the hum of the city around her blending into a comforting background noise. Her footsteps echoed against the pavement as she walked home, the weight of her grocery bags in her hand feeling almost symbolic. The bags, which had seemed so heavy this morning, now felt light, almost inconsequential. The real weight was in her mind, and it was shifting. She thought about the decisions she had made over the years. Every choice she had made had been rooted in practicality, in the need to survive. She'd worked multiple jobs, never questioning the toll it took on her. She had sacrificed relationships, hobbies, and even her own mental and physical health just to stay afloat. But the conversation with Elon, of all people, had opened her eyes to something deeper. She realized that she had been so focused on the grind, on the struggle, that she had forgotten what it meant to live with intention. Rachel arrived at her small apartment, the familiar scent of her minimalistic space comforting her as she set the grocery bags on the kitchen counter. She made herself a cup of tea, taking her time to savor the warmth as it spread through her. She had always loved this quiet ritual at the end of her day, a moment to center herself, to reflect. But tonight, her thoughts felt different. They were no longer just about the next task, the next deadline. They were about her future, her happiness, and her own personal growth. Sipping her tea, Rachel thought about the words Elon had shared with her. You can't pour from an empty cup. It wasn't just a piece of advice. It was a revelation. She realized that she had been pouring herself into everything and everyone else. Her work, her responsibilities, her family. and had left little for herself. The truth was, she had been running on empty for a long time, caught in a cycle of doing instead of being. The exhaustion, the burnout, the constant sense of not being enough. It all made sense now. She had been living in reaction, not in creation. The next morning, Rachel woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She went through her usual routine, but now there was intention behind every action. She wasn't just going through the motions. She took time to enjoy her breakfast, savoring each bite of her toast, the warmth of the coffee as it curled through her body. She made the decision to slow down, to be more present in each moment. As the days passed, Rachel began to make small but significant changes in her life. The first step was setting boundaries. She started by saying no to extra shifts at the grocery store, allowing herself the space to rest and recharge. She cut back on her hours at the diner, refusing to let the need for extra income dictate her life. Instead, she started pursuing the things that brought her joy: photography, reading, spending time with the friends she had neglected for far too long. Slowly, she began to feel like herself again, not just the exhausted worker, but the person she had once dreamed of becoming. But the most profound shift came in the way she viewed herself. Rachel had always prided herself on being strong, capable, and self-sufficient. But in doing so, she had forgotten to honor her own needs, her own worth. She began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as someone worthy of thriving. She realized that in order to truly make a difference in the world, she had to take care of herself first. Only then could she give her best to the people and projects that mattered most to her. One evening, as Rachel was walking through the park near her apartment, she overheard a conversation that made her pause. A group of women were sitting on a bench nearby, laughing and chatting about their work and lives. One of them mentioned how she had been feeling overwhelmed, juggling a full-time job, 2 kids, and a husband who didn't seem to understand how hard she worked. Rachel felt a pang of recognition. The woman's struggles mirrored her own from just a few weeks ago. The feeling of being constantly drained, the belief that she had to do it all on her own. She wanted to step forward, to share her own experience, to offer the insight that had come to her through her unexpected conversation with Elon. But instead, she stayed quiet, listening and reflecting. She knew that sometimes the best way to help others was simply to lead by example. She had started making changes in her own life, but it wasn't just about her. It was about creating a ripple effect, inspiring others to take a step back, to check in with themselves, to put their own needs first for a change. As the weeks went by, Rachel's transformation became more visible, not just to herself, but to others as well. Her friends noticed how much more present she seemed, how much lighter she appeared. Her mother, who had always been proud of Rachel's work ethic, commented on how relaxed and happy she seemed, how she was no longer running herself ragged. Even the regulars at the diner noticed the difference in her energy, the way she greeted them with a genuine smile instead of a tired, forced one. But the most powerful change was within Rachel herself. She had always been an observer, someone who preferred to sit back and watch the world unfold. But now she felt ready to take control of her own narrative. She wasn't just working to survive anymore. She was working to live. She started looking into photography classes, researching how to start her own small business, and dreaming bigger than she ever had before. It wasn't going to be easy, but she knew that the hardest part had already been done. She had learned how to take care of herself, how to prioritize her well-being. The rest would follow. One afternoon, while walking home from the grocery store, Rachel spotted a familiar figure in the distance. It was Elon Musk, walking towards her with a small group of people in tow. As he drew closer, he noticed her too, and a smile spread across his face. "Rachel," he called out, his voice warm. "It's good to see you again." Rachel smiled back, feeling a sense of gratitude rise within her. "It's good to see you too, Elon. Thanks again for that conversation. It really helped me more than you know." Elon nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes it's the simplest things that have the biggest impact." Take care of yourself. Okay. I will, Rachel said, her voice steady and sure. And you take care of yourself too. As Elon walked on, Rachel stood for a moment, watching him disappear into the distance. She felt a sense of peace settle within her, a quiet assurance that the changes she had made were the right ones. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. And in doing so, she was becoming the person she had always hoped to be. The ripple effect had begun, and Rachel knew that her journey had only just started. New beginnings. It had been several months since Rachel had made the decision to change the course of her life. The transformation had been gradual, like a river carving a new path through the earth. Quiet but powerful, subtle yet undeniable. Her life no longer revolved around the relentless cycle of work and exhaustion. She had found a new rhythm, a balance that allowed her to thrive, not just survive. Her mornings no longer started with the heavy weight of obligation pressing on her chest. Instead, she woke up feeling rested, her mind clear and ready for the day ahead. She had stopped overworking, stopped pushing herself beyond her limits for the sake of others or the demands of society. Slowly, Rachel learned to value her own well-being above all else. She had set boundaries, and those boundaries had protected her peace. The first change she noticed was the return of creativity. It had been so long since she had felt that spark, that energy that made her feel alive. It wasn't until she started taking time for herself, until she stopped running on empty, that she realized how much of herself she had lost in the hustle. Photography had always been her passion, something she tucked away in favor of practicality. But now, with a little more time on her hands, she was beginning to pick it back up again. She enrolled in a weekend photography course, and what had started as a way to pass the time soon became something much deeper. The camera in her hands no longer felt like an accessory. It felt like an extension of herself, a tool that allowed her to capture the beauty she had almost forgotten how to see. She started taking photographs of everything: city streets, quiet parks, the everyday moments that people overlooked. The simple act of slowing down and observing the world through a different lens brought a sense of fulfillment that Rachel hadn't realized she had been craving. But photography wasn't the only thing Rachel started to pursue. She also realized that she had been too afraid to dream big, to take the risks that she once believed were out of reach. She'd spent years living in the shadow of other people's expectations, working multiple jobs and taking on responsibilities without question. But now, as she began to trust herself again, she found herself dreaming of bigger things. She thought about the small cafe she had always imagined opening, one where people could gather, sip coffee, and enjoy the kind of community she had longed for. A place where the walls weren't just built with brick and mortar, but with stories, laughter, and shared moments. That dream, once a distant fantasy, began to feel real. Rachel didn't have all the answers, and she certainly didn't have the resources, but she had the belief that she could make it happen. And that belief was enough to set her on a new path. One Saturday morning, she woke up with a new sense of clarity. She had spent the past few months working less, living more, and finding joy in the things she had once forgotten. But today, she was going to take the next step. Rachel sat down at her small desk in her apartment, the sunlight pouring in through the window. She pulled out a notebook and started jotting down her ideas for the cafe, ideas for its design, its concept, the kind of atmosphere she wanted to create. For the first time, the fear that had once held her back felt like a distant memory. It wasn't about money or resources. It was about taking the first step, and then the next, and trusting that the path would unfold as she walked it. Rachel had always been afraid of failure, but as she sat there, the doubt that used to paralyze her was no longer as overwhelming. She wasn't trying to make something perfect. She was simply trying to move forward. After all, failure was part of the process. The more she allowed herself to think about the cafe, the more she realized it wasn't just a business venture. It was a reflection of who she had become. It was a place where people could come together, find refuge from the chaos of their lives, and share their own stories. With a new sense of determination, Rachel reached out to a few local businesses for advice. She asked questions about how to get started, about the challenges they had faced, and the lessons they had learned. She also began researching financing options, learning what it would take to turn her dream into a reality. It was a lot to handle, but Rachel was no longer afraid of the process. She had already taken the first step by acknowledging what she truly wanted, and that in itself was a victory. As she ventured further into this new world, she found that the more she gave herself permission to dream, the more opportunities seemed to appear. She met people who were willing to share their expertise, who offered encouragement, and who helped her build the confidence she needed. Rachel began to believe in herself in ways she hadn't thought possible. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was actively creating her future. At work, things had changed as well. Rachel's new mindset, her newfound energy, began to ripple out into her interactions with others. She was still working at the grocery store, but she no longer felt burdened by it. She had stopped seeing her job as a source of frustration and began to see it as just one part of the larger picture. She treated each customer with the kindness and respect they deserved, and in return, she felt a sense of fulfillment that hadn't existed before. Rachel's coworkers noticed the difference in her too. They began to ask her what had changed, what had given her this new sense of peace, and while she wasn't yet ready to share the full extent of her plans, she couldn't help but smile when they asked. She felt lighter, freer, and more in control of her own destiny than she ever had before. She wasn't waiting for permission to live her life anymore. She was taking it, one step at a time. One evening, as Rachel was closing up the store, she noticed a familiar figure standing by the checkout. Elon Musk had returned, this time without the entourage, just him and his usual calm demeanor. Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude toward him. His simple, unexpected advice had sparked something within her that she couldn't have anticipated. She greeted him with a smile as he approached her register. "Hello again," he said with a nod. "Hi, Elon," she replied, her tone warm but steady. "It's good to see you. How's everything going?" He asked casually, his gaze more attentive than she expected. Rachel paused, and for the first time, she truly took a moment to reflect on where she was. "It's going well," she said with a sense of pride in her voice. "I've been making some changes in my life. I'm starting to pursue the things that make me happy." Elon raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "That's great to hear. What kinds of things are you pursuing?" Rachel smiled, feeling the weight of her dreams becoming more tangible with each word. "I'm working on opening a cafe. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I never thought I had the courage. But now, I feel ready." Elon's expression softened, and he nodded with approval. "That's incredible, Rachel. I'm glad to hear you're chasing your dreams. It takes a lot of courage to step out of your comfort zone, but the rewards are worth it." Rachel nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude well up inside her. "Thank you, Elon. Your words really helped me realize that I didn't have to keep waiting for the perfect moment. I could start now, even if I don't have everything figured out." "You're on the right track," he said, his voice warm. "Don't forget to enjoy the journey too. The process is just as important as the destination." As he left, Rachel stood there for a moment, feeling a sense of clarity wash over her. She wasn't just waiting anymore. She was actively creating the life she wanted, and with each passing day, she felt more confident that she was headed in the right direction. The journey was just beginning, and Rachel was ready to take it on, one step at a time. The unexpected support. As weeks turned into months, Rachel's life continued to evolve in ways she hadn't imagined possible. The changes she had made, those small yet significant shifts in her mindset, had set her on a trajectory towards something new, something exciting. What had started as a simple act of taking better care of herself had snowballed into a series of choices that were transforming her future. Her dream of opening a cafe was no longer a distant thought tucked away in the back of her mind. It was becoming a reality, step by step. Rachel had gathered the information she needed, worked on a business plan, and even found a small location in the heart of the city. It was a cozy spot, tucked between a bookstore and a florist's shop, with large windows that let in streams of natural light. It was perfect. The place felt like home, and every time she visited the space, she could picture the people coming in, sipping coffee, reading books, laughing with friends. It was a community in the making. But as much as she had worked hard to create this dream, the reality of what it took to open a business quickly settled in. There were permits to get, finances to arrange, vendors to contact, and so many other logistical hurdles that she hadn't anticipated. Sometimes, the weight of it all felt overwhelming. She had hoped that she could start this journey on her own, but as the challenges mounted, Rachel realized she would need help. And asking for help had never been her strong suit. She thought back to a conversation she had with her mother one evening. It had been a quiet, reflective night. Rachel had just finished a long shift at the grocery store, and her mother had invited her over for dinner. They sat at the kitchen table, sharing a meal of homemade soup, the soft sounds of the evening in the background. "How's the cafe planning going?" her mother asked, her tone gentle but curious. "It's going," Rachel replied, her voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. "I've been working on all the details, permits, business plans, funding, but I'm realizing it's a lot more than I expected. I think I may have underestimated how difficult it would be to get everything off the ground." Her mother smiled knowingly, her eyes kind. "You've always been a hard worker, Rachel. You've never shied away from a challenge, even when it seemed impossible. But remember, you don't have to do it all alone." Rachel had frowned slightly, looking down at her soup. "I know," she murmured, "but I just don't want to burden anyone. I feel like I should be able to do this myself, you know." Her mother reached across the table and placed a hand on hers, offering a quiet comfort. "It's not a burden to ask for help, sweetheart. You've done so much on your own, but there's nothing wrong with allowing others to be part of your journey. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Rachel had sat with those words for a while, allowing them to sink in. It was something she had always struggled with, allowing herself to rely on others, to share the weight of her dreams. But her mother's words resonated deeply with her, and she knew she had to start letting go of the idea that she had to do it all alone. The next day, Rachel made a decision. She reached out to a few local businesses, some of which she had frequented over the years, asking for advice and mentorship. She was surprised by how willing people were to offer their support. Some gave her guidance on securing small business loans, while others offered valuable insight on how to build relationships with suppliers. She even met with a couple of cafe owners who had been in business for years, sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs. One of the most unexpected sources of support came from a woman named Clara, who owned the bookstore next door to the cafe space Rachel had chosen. Clara was an older woman with silver hair, sharp eyes, and an energy that seemed to crackle with creativity. When Rachel first approached her, she was nervous, unsure of how Clara would respond to the idea of collaborating with a new cafe in such close proximity. But Clara had smiled warmly and immediately offered her help. "I've been running this bookstore for 25 years, Clara had said with a knowing smile. "I've seen the ups and downs, the struggles and the joys. If you need advice, or if you just need a sounding board, you're welcome to come by any time." Rachel had left that conversation with a sense of relief, her shoulders feeling lighter than they had in weeks. Clara's offer of mentorship had been the first of many, and it had become a turning point in Rachel's journey. She began to realize that she didn't have to navigate this path alone. There was an entire community of people who had walked the road before her and were willing to help her find her way. But the most profound support came in the form of a surprise phone call one morning, just as Rachel was about to head out to meet with her bank about securing a loan. The call came through on her phone, and when she saw the number, her heart skipped a beat. It was Elon Musk's assistant, calling to schedule a follow-up meeting. Rachel had almost forgotten about her brief encounter with Elon a few months ago, the one that had set her on this path of self-discovery and growth. But apparently, Elon hadn't forgotten her. "Ms. Rachel, I hope you're doing well," his assistant said on the phone. Elon would like to meet with you again, if you're available. He's been following your progress with the cafe and would like to offer some support. Rachel's mind raced. Support. She had never expected this. The man who had sparked the change in her life, who had, in a single conversation, shown her the value of taking care of herself, was offering help. Yes, of course, I'd love to meet with him, Rachel said, trying to steady her voice. When would be a good time? The assistant quickly arranged a meeting for the following week. When the day came, Rachel was both excited and nervous. She wasn't sure what kind of support Elon had in mind. Financial, mentorship, but when she arrived at the location where they were meeting, she was greeted by Elon's assistant and led into a quiet conference room where Elon was waiting for her. Rachel, it's good to see you again, Elon said, his voice calm and welcoming. Good to see you too, Rachel replied, taking the seat across from him. How's the cafe coming along? He asked, his gaze steady. Rachel shared the progress she had made, the challenges she had faced, and the obstacles that still loomed ahead. As she spoke, she felt a sense of confidence that she hadn't known before. This wasn't a conversation about doubt or uncertainty. It was about possibility and growth. I've been working hard, but it's a big task, Rachel explained. I'm doing everything I can, but there are still so many unknowns. Elon listened attentively, nodding thoughtfully. When she finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair and met her eyes. I think you're doing an incredible job, he said. You're on the right track, and I want to help. Rachel blinked, surprised. Help how? Elon smiled, his gaze kind yet determined. I believe in what you're doing, Rachel. I see the potential for what your cafe can become. I'd like to offer you a grant to help with the initial costs, building out the space, sourcing materials, whatever you need to get started. Rachel's heart raced. A grant? From Elon Musk. She opened her mouth to respond but found herself at a loss for words. It wasn't just the financial support that floored her. It was the belief he had in her, in her dream. It was the knowledge that someone who had accomplished so much in the world was offering her a hand, not just as a philanthropist, but as someone who saw the value in what she was trying to create. I don't even know what to say, Rachel finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. Elon smiled again, his expression softening. You don't need to thank me. You're doing the work. You've earned this. I'm just here to support you. In that moment, Rachel realized that everything had come full circle. She had started this journey with doubt and uncertainty, unsure of whether she was capable of bringing her dreams to life. But now, as she sat across from Elon, a man who had built empires and changed the world, she knew that she was on the right path. With the support of those around her, her mother, Clara, the community, and now Elon, Rachel's dream was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a reality. And the journey ahead, though still full of challenges, felt full of promise. The ripple effect of that one conversation, the one that had ignited a spark, had led her to this moment, and she was ready for whatever came next.